The city was still half asleep when I slid my truck into my usual spot across from the building. A faint pink glow hovered over Austin's skyline, and the street smelled of last night's rain. I checked the clock on my dashboard, 5:45 a.m., right on schedule. My hand closed around the original brass key, the one the founders gave me 17 years ago when this place was barely a startup with folding tables and a fax machine. The key was smooth and warm from years of use, the ridges memorized by my fingers. The lobby lights were dim, one bulb stuttering in the corner like it was trying to wake up with me. The elevator groaned, so I took the stairs as I always did, each step squeaking its familiar greeting. This building had a soul if you knew how to listen. I knew which pipes hissed before it rained, which vents rattled when the server room overheated, and which door hinges cried for oil twice a year. People said buildings didn't remember, but this one did. I pushed open the glass door to the main floor and inhaled the familiar mix of carpet cleaner, burnt coffee, and whatever snacks the night shift left behind. For 17 years, I'd been the human duct tape here. I unclogged toilets, reset breakers, negotiated insurance after the lightning strike of 2014, and even mopped up kombucha after a wellness initiative exploded in the break room fridge. People only noticed me when the printer jammed or the AC quit. The rest of the time, I was a ghost holding up their world. As I crossed the hall toward the kitchen, a flicker in the CEO's office caught my eye. My footsteps slowed. Through the glass wall, a man I didn't recognize stood over the conference table, flipping through thick binders. The early sunlight caught the silver lettering on the covers, relocation plan. Another binder read, lease options. I froze in the doorway, the hum of the server room and the distant gurgle of the water heater filling the silence. The man scribbled something on a notepad, oblivious to me. My stomach tightened. They were making plans, big ones, and I wasn't supposed to know. 17 years of loyalty, and my name wasn't even in the room. I turned toward the hallway, the weight of that brass key suddenly heavier in my pocket, and headed for the stairwell, already sensing that this Friday would not end the way it began, by mid-morning. The email pinged into my inbox, quick sync, HR, no context. Just a calendar slot dropped into my day like a dead weight. My gut clenched. After 17 years, I didn't need a meeting title to read between the lines. I walked into conference room B at 10 sharp. The blinds were half closed, slicing sunlight into nervous stripes across the table. At one end sat Haley, the new HR head, looking polished and too eager, her tablet propped up like a shield. Beside her was a man in a navy suit, hair slicked back, flipping through a folder as if this were a routine dental checkup. "Rowena, thank you for joining," Haley began, her voice too bright, too rehearsed. "We're going through some strategic realignment." The words hit with a cold finality I'd felt before once for someone else, never for me. She pushed a folder across the table. Inside a severance package with 3 months' pay, a non-disclosure agreement, and a printed checklist of things I was expected to surrender. My title was wrong. My name was misspelled. 17 years distilled into a typo. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll need your badge and keys today, and confirmation that you've returned all company property." I stared at him, at the folder, then at the brass keys in my pocket. 11 in total, each one tagged in my neat handwriting, labeled for doors I had oiled, locks I had reprogrammed myself. For a moment, I thought of the pre-dawn hallway, the flickering light, the stranger rifling through relocation binders. So this was the end, quiet, clinical, and meant to erase me. I reached into my bag, pulled out the ring of keys, and held them in my palm. Then, one by one, I laid them on the table with a soft clink, like coins dropping into a well. Haley forced a polite smile. "We appreciate your cooperation." I pushed the folder toward her, leaving my fingerprints on the glossy cover. "You wanted the keys," I said evenly. "Now you have them." I walked out of the room without looking back, my hands suddenly light, and headed toward the parking lot where the weight of what just happened finally settled into a cold, deliberate calm. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, shutting out the muted chaos of the building behind me. The air inside my truck was warm, stale with the faint smell of last night's coffee. Outside, 6th Street was waking up delivery vans rattling over potholes, bike messengers weaving between cars, and the glow of the traffic lights flickering on the wet asphalt. I sat there, hands still on the steering wheel, waiting for the first wave of tears that never came. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, cold and sharp. The humiliation in that conference room had already hardened into something else. My world hadn't collapsed. It had shifted, tilting just enough for me to see the edges of power I'd forgotten I had. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting memory do its work. 17 years ago, the founders couldn't get a landlord to return a call. No credit, no revenue, nothing but 2 laptops and a dream. I'd been the one to meet the property manager, the one who signed the first lease in my own name because nobody else qualified. I'd renewed it year after year, negotiating repairs, updating the insurance, making sure the power stayed on when the city grid hiccuped in the summer heat. Utilities still running through my personal business account. Cleaning crew. They texted me when they couldn't access the basement. Insurance filed under my name for convenience. The way it had always been. My eyes drifted to the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of the building I had kept breathing for nearly 2 decades. They thought they'd erased me with a folder and a forced smile, but I was woven into its walls and pipes and paperwork. Then a single line from the lease rose to the surface of my memory. Clear as ink, renewal requires written notice no later than 30 days prior to expiration. I opened my eyes, started the engine, and felt a low, deliberate heat build in my chest. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I had somewhere else to be. And the first move was already taking shape by the time I reached home. The quiet of my little bungalow felt heavier than usual. I kicked off my shoes, walked straight to the hallway closet, and crouched down in front of the old metal file cabinet that had followed me through 3 moves. Its bottom drawer stuck a little, like it always did, and I yanked it open with a sharp tug. Inside, beneath utility bills and old tax folders, was a hot pink binder with a label I'd written in black Sharpie years ago in case they forget me. My hand lingered on the cover for a moment before I carried it to the kitchen table, when I opened it. The past 17 years spilled out in paper form. There was the original 2006 lease, my signature in bold ink on the first page, amendments for every renewal, with sticky notes marking repairs I had negotiated personally, vendor contracts for utilities, HVAC, cleaning services, and security all running through me, all still alive. Tucked into one sleeve were photos from the early days, mismatched desks, a whiteboard propped on a chair, and me crouched under a table fixing the router while the founders grinned like kids. I flipped to the current lease and scanned the dates. My pulse ticked faster. The renewal notice deadline was July 31st. Today was August 2nd. They had missed it. No email, no letter, no phone call to the property manager. Too busy patting themselves on the back for strategic realignment. They had let the foundation of their empire slip right through their fingers. Legally, they weren't tenants anymore. They were squatters in suits, sipping lattes in a building that no longer belonged to them. The anger that had simmered in the parking lot cooled into something sharper, colder. I closed the binder, smoothed my hand over its cover, and felt my breath slow. This wasn't rage anymore. It was calculation. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg. I just needed to move the right piece at the right time. And the first move would start with a single phone call. I dialed Liam's number with steady fingers, my coffee growing cold on the table. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm with the kind of familiarity that comes from living 2 doors down for nearly a decade. "Rowena, it's been a while. Everything all right? I need your real estate brain," I said. "Today, by noon." We were seated in a corner booth of the local coffee shop, the one with old brick walls and the smell of roasted beans that never quite leaves your clothes. I slid the hot pink folder across the table. Liam flipped it open, scanning the lease, the amendments, the utilities. His eyebrows inched higher with every page. 17 years, I said quietly. He let out a low whistle. They just fired their legal lifeline. And they don't even know it. We got to work. Liam sketched out the lease termination papers on his laptop, explaining the timeline and the notice process in his calm, methodical way. I listened, nodding, my pulse steady as he filled in the blanks that would bring the building back under my control. He leaned back when he was done, his grin sharp. "This will be airtight. They'll have 30 days, and if they don't move, the county handles the rest." I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months, Bloom Pulse. I'd met their founder at the farmer's market, both of us reaching for the last bundle of fresh basil. Young, energetic, full of ideas about creating wellness hubs with salt walls and meditation pods. When I mentioned where I worked, her eyes had lit up. I tapped the number and waited. She answered on the first ring. By the time I hung up, Bloom Pulse had agreed to triple the current rent and take the space as soon as I could clear it. I closed the folder and slid it back into my bag, the plan locking into place with a quiet finality. The next step would require a trip to the property manager's office, and I already knew exactly what I was going to say. Saturday morning, I drove downtown with the pink folder riding shotgun, the streets still quiet except for a few early joggers and the hum of delivery trucks. The building looked calm under the pale sun, no hint of the storm about to roll through its glass walls. I parked in the side lot and headed up to the 4th floor, where the property management office was tucked away behind a door that always smelled like copier toner and old carpet. Inside, Thomas glanced up from his monitor, blinking at me in mild surprise. "Rowena," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Didn't think I'd see you this weekend." I placed the folder on his desk and opened it to the lease. "Thomas, I just need to confirm something. Did you receive any written renewal notice for Suite 221? He tapped on his keyboard, squinting at the screen. After a moment, he shook his head. "Nope. Nothing logged. I assume they were just going month to month until they got their act together." I felt a slow, deliberate satisfaction settle in. "That tracks," I said, "because they don't have the right to be in that suite anymore without my say-so." He raised his eyebrows. "They really didn't." I only smiled and let the weight of that silence speak for itself as I stepped back into the hallway. My phone buzzed. It was Dan, the facilities guy who'd helped me more times than I could count over the years. "Hey, just so you know." His text read, "They rented the back office to some crypto bros last month. Monitors everywhere. Smells like energy drinks and panic." I stopped mid-step, reading it twice. A secret sublease clear breach of the contract I held in my hand. A laugh rose in my chest, soft but sharp. I texted back, "Thanks, Dan." They dug their own hole deeper than I ever could. I walked out into the morning sun, the city humming quietly around me, and felt the plan settle into its final shape as I headed home to prepare the papers that would end this for good. Sunday evening settled over Austin in a soft, amber glow when I pulled into the Bloom Pulse office. Their space wasn't much yet, just an open loft with white walls, polished concrete floors, and a single potted fiddle leaf fig soaking up the last of the light. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and some kind of essential oil blend that promised clarity. Across the table, their founder, A young woman with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence slid the new lease toward me. I read every line even though I already knew it by heart. Triple the rent, 5-year term, security deposit wired. Her pen hovered for a second before she smiled. "Your vibe starts here," she said, nodding to the sample banner rolled up in the corner. I couldn't help but glance at the photo mock-up soft sunlight on yoga mats. Someone meditating in an office that would soon be mine to hand over. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. My old company thrived on clutter, ego, and neglect half-drunk coffee cups on desks, sticky notes curling under fluorescent lights, egos bouncing off glass walls. Bloom Pulse was clean and intentional, a place that felt like it exhaled. Signing that lease felt less like revenge and more like handing the building back to something worthy of it. I signed, initialed the pages, and slid the pen across the table. The young founder grinned, already texting her team that the downtown hub was officially theirs. Driving home, I took the long route, circling past the old building. The executive floor still blazed with light, probably last-minute slide decks and hollow pep talks about the next quarter. I slowed at the curb, my headlights off, and let my eyes drift up to the windows that once held my world. I didn't feel bitterness anymore, just a quiet, steady satisfaction. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel as I imagined the fluorescent orange notice ready to claim its place. Then I turned the corner, letting the city swallow the building in my rearview mirror, and went home to sleep for the first time in months without a single weight on my chest. By the time the sun was fully up, the plan was already in motion. I sat in my sunroom with a mug of black coffee, my cat curled against my hip, and my phone on the table like a theater ticket at exactly 8:03 a.m. Thomas texted me a photo that nearly made me laugh out loud. There it was, the fluorescent orange eviction notice zip-tied to the CEO's glass office door. Bright and impossible to ignore. My signature glared from the bottom of the page, the county seal pressed like a quiet drumbeat of authority. It was the loudest silence I'd ever orchestrated. Within minutes, the building erupted. Dan sent another message, a shaky video this time. HR hovered in the hallway, pale and frantic, phones pressed to their ears. A cluster of employees gathered near the elevators, whispering and filming from behind their coffee cups. Someone had already posted a picture to a Slack channel. The reflection of the orange paper on the glass made it look like the office itself was on fire. By 8:20, the CEO finally arrived. Late and unshaven, Bluetooth earpiece blinking like a warning light. The video caught him mid-step as he read the notice, his face going from confusion to fury in 3 seconds flat. He yanked at the zip tie, failed, then spun toward Haley from HR as if she were personally responsible for the universe. The chaos only multiplied. Phones buzzed, laptops snapped shut, and then, inevitably, someone leaked it to the local business gossip blog. By 9:00 a.m., the headline was Live Downtown Tech Firm Faces Eviction Meltdown. The accompanying photo showed the CEO mid-shout, mouth open, hand in the air, the orange paper glowing behind him like poetic punctuation. I leaned back in my chair, letting the warmth of the coffee seep into my palms, and watched the video loop on my phone. My former world was cracking wide open without me ever setting foot inside, and the sound of their downfall was sweeter than any applause. As the notifications kept pinging, I knew the next call I received would be from someone who finally realized just how much I'd been holding up all along. The sun had long slipped behind the rooftops when my phone finally lit up with his name, Nathan Altman. I let it ring twice, maybe 3 times, before I picked up, swirling the last of my red wine in the glass. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, his voice already fraying. "You can't do this. You can't evict an entire company." I took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch. You fired the woman who held the keys to your empire. I said evenly, literally. He sputtered on the other end. We assumed the lease was handled our legal team. This is insane. The board is losing their minds. The investors, I cut him off before his excuses could take root. You assumed about everything. About the lease. About me. About what it actually takes to keep that building breathing. And now you're living with the consequences. The line went quiet except for the faint hum of his breathing. I imagined him standing in that glass office, looking out over a city that no longer cared he existed. Is there anything we can do? He asked finally, the fight draining from his voice. Oh, Nathan, I said, my tone almost gentle. You were doomed before you ever fired me. The new lease was signed days ago. Bloom Pulse takes over next month. You were already living on borrowed time. I reached for my laptop, opened a new email, and attached every document that mattered: original lease, all amendments, termination notice, proof of their secret sublease, I CC'd legal, HR, and facilities, because Dan deserved the show. My subject line was short company property, returned as requested. I hit send as Nathan exhaled a broken sound on the other end of the line. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The cut was clean, final, and irreversible. I ended the call without another word, closed my laptop, and leaned back in my chair. Tomorrow, I would see the last piece of this story fall into place. By Friday morning, the last remnants of the company I had given 17 years to were being wheeled out under a sky so bright it almost felt staged. Herman Miller chairs, dusty ficus plants, and half-empty boxes of branded mugs rolled into rented U-Hauls with squealing brakes. Someone had taped a piece of printer paper to the side of one truck strategic relocation. The viral video of Nathan Altman throwing a folding chair against the truck door had already made its rounds online. I watched it once. No sound. Just the hollow clang and the stunned look of his staff in the background. By the time tech blogs and local gossip pages picked it up, the captions wrote themselves, "When your office karma finally arrives." I didn't go downtown. I didn't need to. Dan texted me a picture of the empty suite, lights off. My reflection faintly caught in the glass of his phone. I stayed home and watered my peace lily instead, letting the soft rhythm of the house settle around me. That afternoon, a courier arrived with a cellophane-wrapped basket from Bloom Pulse, inside organic fruit, a small jar of lavender honey, and a handwritten card. "Thank you for giving us a home. We'll take care of it." I set it on the counter and felt a genuine smile rise, the first in a long time that wasn't edged with calculation. In the hallway, above my first paycheck from 2006 and a photo of the building during its scrappy early days, I hammered a small brass hook into the wall. From my bag, I pulled out the original office key. No plaque, no frame, just a piece of metal heavy with memory. I hung it there and stepped back. They wanted company property returned. I said softly to the empty house, "I gave it all back." With interest, I exhaled, feeling the weight of 17 years slide off my shoulders. For the first time in decades, my life didn't smell like printer ink, burnt coffee, or obligation. It smelled like freedom, quiet and complete.